Pro streamer. I was muted. Hi everyone. I'm Scratticus. I'm a full-time Twitch TV streamer. I host a community that is all about inclusion, bringing new people into TTRPGs and D&D. And today I am here with Nefarious, and we are going to be doing an interview based on game media communities and responsibility for their course at Eastern Oregon Universities, hence the flag. So hi Nefarious, who are you and how are you?
Hello, I'm so glad that you're hosting me here. I really appreciate it, and I'm doing really well. It's a little too warm for me. It's now May, and I like long sleeve shirts. It's not good. But I'm very glad to be here, and I'm really excited to talk to you about a topic that I think is really, really important and only growing in importance.
Definitely. I was very excited when you reached out because we had a brief synopsis of the sort of questions that we'd be asking today, and it's something that I'm definitely passionate about. So I'm definitely excited to talk about it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, let's just jump right into it, unless you want me to further introduce myself. I will say that this is from a capstone project, kind of an independently run research and just data collection or whatever, just to prove that I paid attention in school and using that knowledge. So without further ado, if you have nothing else to add, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of like taking the reins from you on your own channel.
Please do.
But let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about media, representation, identity, and inclusion, specifically in games and gaming spaces. This is something that we've recently seen a lot of conversation on in like the Twitterverse and just in general, is how the gaming community reacts to diversity and diverse characters in games, and how kind of the gaming community views the subjects of race, gender, sexuality, and so on. So first, I'm going to ask you, as you said yourself, your mission is to include people from very diverse backgrounds, which I think is incredibly, I love it. I am all about it. Do you think that the way that characters of, gay characters, queer characters, people of color are represented in games, both tabletop and video games, do you think that the way we see those characters in the games and the media that we consume impacts the way that us as a community responds to those people?
Yes, definitely. So one of the things that I often say, partially because my brand is the Scratticus Academy, and every day's a school day. So every day we come here and learn something. And if we're representing characters in games, essentially what we're learning is how we as people interact with those characters. So essentially, the way that we behave around those characters, the way that we interact with them, the way that we represent them and talk about them, it will be directly teaching people what is okay and what is not okay to carry through to real life, And I mean, if you look at the statistics are shocking. I think it's something like I think I've read recently on Twitter that a black woman will receive 85% more harassment than, say, I can't remember what it was compared to, but I think it was a white guy. And you just got to wonder where people learn that kind of harassment is okay, and try to represent it in games in a way that makes it not okay. Like, I play a lot of games. I've got too many hours in Roll20. Let's not talk about it. It's embarrassing. But like, the amount of times that you see a character getting harassed, and a party will just step in and be heroes. One person learns that that's how you should react to harassment. I'm a happy guy,
That's really wonderful. I'm really glad that you have that experience, and that other people can have that experience. And do you think that people in the gaming community that are other content creators and influencers have, whether intentionally or otherwise, conditioned people to believe that harassment is okay? Do you think that people have kind of absorbed this idea that as long as you say, oh, it was just a joke, or I didn't mean it that way, that it is kind of normalized, that sort of behavior?
Oh, yeah, that's one of the big faux pas of the internet, really, isn't it? At some point we decided that the best way to deal with trolling was to either find it funny and move on or ignore it. But and I refer to straight to trolling, because trolling is essentially harassment, just in a comedic, harmless, anonymous form, which is fake. It's never okay, you know. It's never okay to make someone feel. I mean, because we've all been there, I think, or maybe we haven't. Maybe that's part of the problem. But like when you are depressed, or when you do have things that can be picked on, you don't know what people are going through in their day-to-day life, you know. That's the big thing. You don't know what battles they're fighting. You don't know who in their family is going through what, or what persecution they faced. And to do this sort of thing online can have very real repercussions in their actual lives. I mean, we've all heard, or at least I heard growing up, I mean, I don't know, but about stories of kids who got bullied online and it ended to the worst results possible, you know, including things like suicide and self-harm. It's really real, you know. You can't pass things off as a joke. It's not okay. That's my stance on it, anyway.
I believe I agree with you. That's something here in LeGrand a few years ago. Actually, a gay teen committed suicide due to bullying. And it's something that our community has become kind of acutely aware of. And myself, as a gay man, I'm very sensitive to that sort of behavior and that sort of thing. And do you think that to kind of try to lighten the mood a little bit, do you think that when people engage in role-playing games or video games, especially people from marginalized groups who are victim of a lot of harassment, do you think that those people use those games to kind of teach themselves that it is, especially in a community like yours, teach themselves that it is okay to be themselves, that despite there is a lot of negativity out there, you think that people are kind of socialized in a way by interacting with games and gaming, especially in games where there's a lot of positive representation of diverse groups, to, you know, help them become more comfortable with themselves?
Definitely. I believe that everyone has a right to be happy, fundamentally. And I don't believe that you can be happy if you're not being yourself and representing yourself. So one of my big things that I often tell to my gamers, to my players, to my DMs, and everything else is that they are the priority to me. Chat, I love you so much. All of you in chat, I love you. But if any of you threaten any of my players, get out. You're blocked. You're banned. I don't care about you. You know, I go to, so we use several things to make sure that people do feel safe, because obviously it can be when you want to come and be yourself and you've been bullied for that in the past, or you associate that with bad experiences, it's important to have a bit of a safety net in place. So one of the things we do is we stream with safety systems. We have like XNO cards, things you might have seen at gaming conventions and that sort of thing, just to make sure that people feel safe, so that no one goes off an emotional cliff edge during a game, because I don't want to inflict that on anyone. But to answer the question, is it important to be yourself? Or is it important to represent yourself and be able to relax in a game and be yourself? Yes. And one of the nice things about games is that it really creates a nice environment for that to happen, because okay, side point, we'll talk about that in a minute, because I'll definitely sidetrack. One of the nice things about games, especially the games the way we run it on the channel, is there's so much going on. You've got more stuff to deal with than the fact that, you know, the Tabaxi Bob is a gay cat. You know, like, not that that's a problem anyway, but if you were inclined to think that's a problem, the dragon eating your family is more of a problem. You know, you learn to prioritize a bit. But, and that's really quite a new thing as well, because what we're seeing a lot in the D&D community at the moment is a bit of a kickback from... I'm choosing my words carefully at the minute, because my gut was to say the older community, but that's not necessarily true. There are some amazing people from the older community who have always felt this way, the way we play, but there's also a lot of people out there who see DMing and gaming as a bit of a power trip, you know, and will use it to try and purvey their views through the game, which isn't ideal. you know, and that's not something we encourage here at the Academy either.
Right. So actually kind of similar to that is a lot of, I think, possibly the reason that these people feel this way is the way that different kinds of people, women, queer people, people of color, have been represented in traditional games media until very recently was pretty dicey. It was very, a lot of negative or very token representation. So now that that's changing, do you think that not only in the way that we represent those characters and those people, but the language we use when talking about those people and those kinds of characters, do you think just the general way that we talk or content creators talk influences the way that we as a community feel about those people and the way that we talk about those people?
Yes, definitely. You don't even realize the things that you say have almost a subliminal effect on the way your mind works. We've spent a lot of time as a society, the whole race, I think, of humans with exclusions, working on getting rid of racist slurs and things. There's still a few that slip through, you know, people can correct themselves, and there's an etiquette about that as well, which we'll address in a minute. But there's still some that, you know, slip through because people don't realize it's a racist slur. So, for example, a Mexican standoff, for example, is often used to describe people all pointing guns at each other or something like that. But actually, that's kind of a slur, you know. One that I'm working on big time at the moment, I'm pretty good on the racist slurs. I think I've managed to get rid of all, or not all, if not most of them, is gender-neutral language. Gender is a massive problem in today's society. A lot of people are confused about it because, heck, gender's really confusing. But like things like just simple things like oh hi you guys. Instant masculine inflection on chat on everyone around will make perhaps the females in chat feel like maybe they're not so welcome. Even if I'm not directly saying that, it subliminally affects everyone, you know? And so, like, that's why I'm trying to, like, learn more gender-neutral terms like peeps and that sort of thing. And it's a constant progression. And that's important as well. It is a constant progression. I don't think you ever get to a point where you just suddenly are like, hey, we did it. We've got the perfect vocab. We're the perfect community now. There'll always be something else that we have to just get on top of and, you know, correct our language in different ways, because there's always going to be different issues, you know. And it is important. It's definitely important to make sure that you are willing to change and move with the newer conventions, because at the end of the day, it's people's feelings, it's how welcome people feel, and it's how people feel like they should be treated and how they should treat others. Because that's a huge mind trip when people feel like because their favorite streamer treats women this way, perhaps that's how they deserve to be treated. That happens, you know, like, and if it's good on you, but if it ain't so good, it can become dangerous, you know. And I mentioned a second ago about etiquette, because etiquette's very important when using language as well. It's always okay to correct someone. Yes, that person's going to go red-faced. Yes, they're going to be embarrassed. I've had it happen to me myself. You know, you fluster for a second. But that's okay. Don't apologize. The apology draws attention away from the issue. Apologizing just draws it back to you and your personal development and becoming a better person, which is, you know, it's great, Bob, but, you know, at the moment we're addressing the fact that this is wrong. Just correct yourself. So, for example, one of the things that happens often, because we have a lot of LGBTQ people on the channel, is we'll misgender people. It happens, you know. Some people prefer they, them. Others prefer he, him, she, her. People, you know, as much as I believe that anyone can be any gender they like, we've got a lot of past enforcement of when someone looks feminine, they are a female, and when someone looks masculine, they are a male. So sometimes it happens. Sometimes you'll, instead of using they, them, you'll use a he, him, or instead of using a ze, them, you'll use a she, her, or whatever. Just correct yourself. When someone corrects you, just don't apologize, just next sentence, or if you realize you've done it when you're saying it, don't leave it. That's the other thing as well. Like, if I was talking to you, Nefarious, I've put your pronouns from your profile, I think, on the chat.
Yes.
I always do that as well, display pronouns for people in chat. But if I referred to you as a she, her, I would, so I'd be like, I'm here with Nefarious, she is here. I'm here with Nefarious, he is here to talk about this. Just correct yourself and move on. You show people that it's okay to make mistakes, first of all, which it is. You show people that correcting yourself in public is okay, which is important because some political leaders don't show a lot of that. And you also show that pronouns are important.
Mm-hmm. And you've actually answered my next half of that question, which was, does the language you use impact how inclusive our community is? And as you stated, it seems that it absolutely does. Just by a lot of people, myself, have had to break really bad habits when you get into very heated and playing a game. Maybe you, especially in my younger years, throw out whatever expletive, and it's a habit a lot of people had to break, I think. And I think just that casual sort of, actually. Another question for you, as I'm about to bring up that topic, do you think that the gaming community has a problem with casual racism, homophobia, and sexism?
Yes! Yes! My god, yes. Okay, so one thing that I don't stream, but I do in my spare time, is I play a lot of Overwatch, which is often referred to as salt mining, because everyone on there is... Well, not everyone, but I don't go a day without seeing someone use the racial slur, which is an anagram of ginger, to refer to a black person, or any other kind of... Definitely, I'm trying to think of the term for being anti-LGBTQ right now. I can't even think of the word, but slurs against gays and that sort of thing. Used as an insult, to describe other gamers. And yes, it's prevalent. I don't go a day on Overwatch without seeing it come up in that little box on the corner. That's why with the times I do stream it, I make sure I put my webcam over the chat box, so no one can see, because I don't want to promote it in any way, shape or form. And yes, there is a problem with it. And I mean, there's a lot of problem with representation as well. Not just in video gaming, but also in tabletop gaming. It's very male dominated. Very male dominated. I try and include a lot of alternate genders. I try to include a lot of, as much as I can, different races. I try not to be too so I don't try and gatekeep. I don't try and do the whole, sorry, got enough white guys this season, you can't come in. But at the same time, I will often reach out to people to see if they want to come in game. Quite a few people in the community might recognize the sentence, "Oh, hi, would you be interested in coming to play a stream tabletop one-shot on my channel sometime?" Because I probably send out about 100 of those a month, just to try and get more people into the community and to come and share with us,
That's awesome, and actually in some ways segues into our my next question. Kind of the big question of the whole interview is, are streamers, content creators, YouTubers, whatever, are they responsible for the attitudes of their community? Do you think that the way they behave dictates, or at least influences, the way that their communities behave?
Yes, I do. I think there's 2 points to this as well, 2 different ways. Slightly off the question, one of them, but to answer the question directly, this channel has an 18 plus content filter warning on it. You have to say that you're 18 to come on the channel, because sometimes we do talk about sex and big issues and that sort of thing, and I don't want impressionable ears listening to it. But at the same time, I remember being 15 and watching The Matrix, which was 18 rated. I remember, buying comics I shouldn't buy because I looked older than I was and all the rest of it. Even when you have that sort of barrier in place, you're going to be speaking to impressionable ears. And impressionable ears doesn't just mean young people either. Quite a few people can be impressionable quite a lot older. So the way that I act will definitely affect the impressionable people in this community. Some people are not so impressionable, and as the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but if they want to hang around in the community, it's probably because of the way I behave, because that's a big part of the community, which hopefully means they're interested in perhaps self-betterment, which I believe to be an ongoing process. As I said earlier, you're always trying to make yourself better. But it's not just the way we act and the way we behave and the language we use that's important. I'm very active in moderating my stream as well. I'm not very good at multitasking, but for some reason streaming I can do it really easily. But like, I will also moderate my community very closely to let them know what I will allow and won't allow in the community. You know, we used to have a free strikes rule. We sort of added to that an addendum that if you come in straight off the bat, guns blazing with racism or anything like that, you get an insta-ban. But essentially, if someone, let's say someone in chat right now said something homophobic or something like that, they'd get purged. So we'd remove all of their chat comments. We wouldn't time them out. We'd just get rid of the comment and say, hey, you've been purged because you said this, which is homophobic and unacceptable in this community. So, you know, describe why you've acted, move on. If they then come back and like, because some people, you know, it's the internet, they get angry, they're a keyboard warrior, they type something else, time them out for 10 minutes, let them know why they've been timed out. And, you know, it takes a committed troll to sit through a 10-minute timeout and come back, but if they were to do it, we'd then ban them, you know? Which is my way of making sure that the community behaves in a way which is acceptable to me and to the other people in this community, because I want everyone in this community to feel safe. I want them to feel like they can be themselves, and I want them to be able to express more than themselves as well. I want them to feel comfortable enough in themselves to be able to experiment, you know? So like, I often play characters of all sexualities. I love exploring different things. Personally, I'm a hetero guy, happily married. But I love playing different characters and exploring gay relationships. I love exploring pansexual characters. I'm currently playing a character on Thursday nights who's a pansexual adolescent who's just sort of like awakening to the idea that everyone's hot, like, which is just a very strange scenario for them to be going through. But I want everyone to feel comfortable enough to do that, to try different things and really not only better themselves but also be able to see things from other people's point of views.
Right, and that's definitely something important. I mean, everyone is born with this kind of fixed perspective in some ways. I can only view life from my own skin. I can't really fully understand everything else, and really appreciate that you're working so hard in order to foster this such a welcoming and such an inclusive community, something that I really hope kind of spreads to a lot of other places. I'm not sure how much time we have left. Sorry, that's like a weird.
We've got about 10 minutes. We'll be running the Doors of Dinera rerun at 6 p.m. So we've got 10 minutes. Are you thinking of moving on to audience questions?
Yeah, I figure we could spend the last 10 minutes so we could get to as many audience questions as possible. And I think you've answered at least my few questions very, very substantially. I'm really happy with those answers, and I think definitely help kind of from the little bit of data I've collected so far, it actually appears that most of the people I have surveyed agree with you in a lot of ways. Perhaps not as much as I would like, but it's seeming to be a very positive change. So I would happily answer any questions anyone in the audience might have. So feel free to ask. I am supposed to be at least somewhat educated about this.
So let's head over to the chat and see what people have been saying. First of all, I can see some biddies in there. Thank you very much, Rory Rose, for the biddies. Thanks for supporting us. Let's see. I wonder if Dungeons and Dragons would be as popular if it's called Dungeons in Dragons. Intent counts, but the recipient gets the final word on whether comments are harassment or not. That's a good point. Yeah, it's. That gives me a question for you, Nefarious. Do you think, like, if one group finds something offensive and another group doesn't, should you change your behavior around both groups, do you think?
That is a really good question. So recently a big argument about when someone says, I do not like what you said and we're gonna, punish you for what you said or how you behaved. A lot of people, at least in the United States, love to shout about free speech. However, there is as long as free speech only protects you from the government. So if somebody finds something to be offensive, even if I do not, if I think it's fine, and that may be because I don't understand the context or the history of that word or the behavior, like I can't understand what it feels like to have, a racial slur thrown at me because I'm a white dude. I don't get what that feels like. I understand homophobic slurs, so I might be able to empathize in some ways. But I think you should ask yourself, if I want people to respect my beliefs and my sensitivities and my, the things that I have issues with, you have to respect theirs too. You can't do rules for thee, but not for me. And as a result, I think you just kind of have to evaluate the behavior. I think 90% of the time, the person who is offended does have a lot of agency in that. Like if somebody is upset by a joke that I made, I will apologize to them and not make the joke again, because they may understand more, like the joke might mean something different to them or that group of people that I don't fully understand. But I'm sure there's some times when, at least it's not really the same, but dietary wise, you don't have to change your diet because someone else doesn't want to. But that's very completely garbage analogy now that I've like said it out loud. But I think generally you just kind of have to evaluate that behavior. Is that, a toxic behavior trait? Is that, somehow prejudiced? Or is it, seeming, it's kind of iffy, but I would say generally it's like the commenter said, intent does mean something, but it's the recipient of the comment or the harassment that really does have the final say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I might add to that as well, educate. If someone educates me about something being harassment, I would probably try and take it to that other group maybe and try and explain to them why it's harassment as well. And even if it's in vain, the attempt's there, We've got some more questions come in. Nefarious, can you explain a bit more about the goal of your research? Fellow researcher here, and I missed the intro. So if we could have a quick recap, that'd be amazing.
So this is, I want to clarify, I'm not trying to answer these questions specifically. I was going to, but was told that I don't have enough time to do that since I'm graduating here in just 5 weeks. The general goal is to figure out, how does the gaming community and the games media and so on feel about diversity, inclusion, and those topics. I read a book by author T.L. Taylor called Raising the Stakes, The Rise of Esports. And one sentence, I remember it perfectly. Esports is like a high school in how it treats gender, sexuality, and race. And in my own experiences in the gaming community, I think that's true. I think the way that it's so bottom heavy, so many people in the gaming community are so young that we don't have the life experience to really make educated, to make educated behavior. That's not a sentence. But essentially, how do people feel? Like, why are we like a high school? Why do we have these juvenile perceptions? And I think a lot of that has to do with how games media represents those people. Media teaches us how to feel about ourselves in the culture, not just ourselves, but others. How do I feel? 10 years ago in America, every news story about gay people had some kind of negative spin on it about, traditional marriage or whatever. And that teaches queer people how to feel about themselves. Now we're seeing all of this terrible stuff about transgender people in the States, and that's teaching them how to feel about themselves. And we have the same kind of thing in in games and just globally in our community. And I kind of want to figure out why that is. Why do we represent these issues in this way, and why do we respond to these issues in this way?
Thank you. We've got another question come in as well. Scratticus, what do you think is the best way to attract certain demographics or mindsets to your community versus the previous question of removing trolls and such? I am a big believer in your vibe attracts your tribe. If I'm out there being myself, being inclusive, creating a safe space for people to come and do the same, you'll find me. Some of you are already here. People are on their way. I often do shout outs to different people who I've brought through the academy, and I find them to be a shining example of what I hope for as they play games, go on to DM, all in inclusive ways. But it's almost becomes a back issue, this stuff, because I'm more focused on their gaming ability, because if they weren't inclusive and everything, they wouldn't even be here. So I often put out tweets every now and again about, hey, if you want to come and play new games, come and play here. people will come along, and sometimes you do get people who maybe have trolling intent, but also really want to be part of the game, so they just learn how to behave to be a part of the community, because I'm very big on, if you can't behave, you're not welcome. But also I will reach out to people that I see having similar debates on Twitter or other social media. You know, if you see someone out there fighting for I don't know, fighting for gay rights, or fighting for some country that's you know, being oppressed or whatever, and it looks like they also play a game, remember, not everyone can be a warrior for righteousness all the time. Some people need to come and chill out, and that's what this is about. You know, you don't have to be a warrior here. We're all looking after each other. We're all making sure everyone's okay. How do you feel? You know, share it. Come and be part of a game. Enjoy yourself. Kick back. Build it and they will come approach. Pretty much. Scrolling back up. Is this a rebroadcast? No, we are live.
Yes, this is live.
I should almost apologize to various. I'm like, hey, do you want to do it live? You're like, yeah, sure. And then, I don't actually know many slurs. I usually go based on context, and since I don't hang around bigots, I don't hear many. Fantastic, you're living the dream. This conversation is so important, and one that is sadly often derided. Yeah,
I actually have a question for you, and just the chat in general. What do you think about fantasy racism? And I don't mean using real life slurs in games, which is like an objectively wrong thing to do. But I mean, you know, like in Shadowrun, some people who are racist towards elves call them Keebs, you know, like Keebler elves. What are your opinions on that kind of thing?
I mean, it really depends on the campaign you're playing and which people you're playing with. I'm very big on not putting racism into games, because I want this to be an inclusive community where people don't feel like they have to face the same things that they face in their everyday lives. You know, like we said earlier, that statistic, you know, a black woman will receive 85% more harassment, and just because it's directed at a Kevlar elf rather than a black person doesn't make it any less racism, doesn't mean that they experience the same things any less, and doesn't mean it's any less shocking. Do I think it can be used? It depends on the group. So one of the things that we have is lines and veils that we use in the background. Channel standards is we never want to talk about sexual abuse and rape. We never want to talk about that. As far as we're concerned in fantasy, that never happens. Let's look at different scenarios. In the one of our popular viewer games at the moment, Riders on the Storm, we had a discussion before the show, and we decided that, like, hey, we're going to be playing a game set in the Wild West. There was a lot of racism in the Wild West. There was a lot of slavery, and sex workers were not treated with a lot of respect. How are we going to address that? We did it in a session 0, not live. We talked to the regular players and decided that racism and slavery were not going to be a part of this world. They just don't happen. And sex workers are treated with respect. And we went from there. In other campaigns, there are people, you know, sometimes there are NPCs or villains who are showing these detestable, like, racist slurs. Like there's one in our Fading Footsteps thing. There's this high schooler, Tiffany, who's also a police watchman. It's a bit complicated. Is very anti-elves because their nation is currently at war with the elves, and as far as she's concerned, elves killed her dad. And it's interesting seeing her feelings about that and how we feel about her, because we detest her straight away. But yeah, Kent there, Tiffany, the worst. There we go. Well, I like scenarios when PCs discover that monsters are not the stereotypes that they thought they were. I think they're promoting thinking differently and promotes the acceptance of differences. That's very true. Thank you very much, Tamaric Peleus. And Revin, I think when approached from a perspective of this is wrong behavior, I think it can be very enlightening in some stories, games, media, etc. Star Trek is a good example of a franchise that has used that well to educate that this exists and this is bad by showing it to people from a different perspective. Sometimes in fantasy we can learn more about ourselves and real events and behaviors by being able to see it from an outside perspective. That's a very true thing. That's very true. Again, intent is important. I think if you're using racism or anything like that with the intent of highlighting problems, maybe even making people realize behavior that they might not even realize they show themselves. Like we talked earlier about the slurs that you might use that you don't realize are harassing yet. It can be important to maybe use those to show how the players feel in that moment and use it as another opportunity to educate.
I agree.
We are about out of time. Nefarious, thank you so much for this. I've really enjoyed this interview. This has been one of the more enjoyable ones, probably because I'm quite passionate about it. Is there anything you'd like to...
I'm so glad.
Is there anything you'd like to say as a wrap-up?
Thank you guys so much for stopping by. Thank you everybody for stopping by and watching. I really appreciate it. There's a survey that I posted both on my Twitter and that I believe is possibly in the chat. I haven't been following the chat, I must admit. I would love it if everybody could fill that out. It would be really useful for me doing my research and for my final project. So I really appreciate that everyone took the time to stop here. And I really want to thank you, Scratticus, for hosting me. I'm very, very glad for it. So again, thank you guys so much. Thank you everybody so much for tolerating my ramblings.
No, you've been fantastic. Thank you. Very enjoyable interview. See people saying thanks for the wonderful interview, and also I've put the survey link in there. Those of you in chat, if you would please go and fill out the survey to help out Nef in their studies. We are going to close the interview now. I will be running the rerun of Dunera in the next couple of minutes. I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you very much for this interview, Nef. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Until next time, everyone. Keep on evoking emotions. We'll catch you later on. Bye.